In 24 years of service at Vor's Reach, Delmore had learned to read a room the way other men read weather. He knew what the stillness in the front hall meant when Mr. Vor came down the main stair. That particular quality of quiet, like air before a storm holds its breath. And he knew what the staff's quick glances toward doorways meant when Mr. Vor had spoken to someone and not raised his voice. He knew the weight of a room when the feared man entered it, and he knew the exact posture of a man trying very hard not to be noticed leaving. He had learned these things in the way a wine steward learns the contents of a cellar, 1 year at a time, one label at a time, until the knowledge was so deep it felt less like learning than like breathing. What he had not learned, in 24 years, was how to see the person standing quietly in the corner. Her name was Nora. She arrived on a Tuesday in October, engaged through a contracted firm to spend 3 weeks cataloging and repairing the water-damaged sections of the estate's archive collection, a project Mr. Vor had ordered begun after the autumn flooding had come through the lower annex and warped 2 full shelving units. She was slight, unhurried, and carried a canvas satchel full of archival tissue and pencil cases. She wore her hair pinned back, and her coat was serviceable rather than fine, and on her first morning at Vor's Reach, she asked Delmore only where she might find the tea service for the annex, and whether the north-facing window could be opened for airflow without catching the weather. Delmore told her. He did not ask her name a second time. Aldous Crane, who had been the estate's archivist for 11 years, showed her to the lower annex himself. Crane was a man of considerable confidence and a very good memory for the hierarchy of the house. He had Mr. Vor's trust entirely, or so it appeared. He sat at the right of the table at the household meetings. He had his own key to the upper archive, and he signed the inventory reports that went quarterly to the family's solicitors in the city. He wore the position well, with the ease of a man who has never been questioned, and who does not expect to be. He showed Nora to the shelves with the manner of a man showing someone the less interesting portion of a country he owned, pointed out which ledgers she was to catalog and which she was not to touch, and left her to it. Delmore passed the open annex door twice that first week and did not pause. He noticed only that she worked in silence, with no radio, no conversation, no sound at all except the occasional careful turn of a damaged page. It was the anniversary dinner that made him pay attention for the first time. Mr. Vor held an anniversary dinner each autumn, a private occasion, 8 covers, the estate's senior household staff, and 2 members of the family trust's outer board. Delmore took charge of the evening's wine personally, as he had every year for 2 decades. He had ordered the cases from the usual merchant in late September, and checked them in himself on the Monday before the dinner, inventorying each bottle against the consignment list. On the evening of the dinner, 2 hours before service, he was carrying the decanted first wine through the lower passage, when he nearly stepped on Nora, who was crouched on the stone floor of the corridor, just outside the cellar entrance, with one of the dinner bottles in her hands, and her face very close to the label. He stopped. "Can I help you?" She stood without apparent embarrassment, held the bottle out to him, and said, in the manner of someone reporting a plain fact rather than an accusation, that the bottle in her hand was not from his consignment. The label was correct, she said, but the capsule crimp was a different press. She had noticed it while returning a ledger to the lower shelf, where 3 bottles from his service trolley had been set aside. She thought he would want to know. He took the bottle from her. He examined the capsule in the passage light, and then he examined the other 2 she had set on the shelf beside it. All 3 were substitutes. Someone had replaced the original bottles after his Monday inventory, carefully done, with correct labels, with the kind of attention to surface detail that only succeeds when no one thinks to look at anything but the surface. He stood in the passage for a moment. He looked at her, this quiet day hire with the canvas satchel, who had no reason at all to say anything, and who had said it anyway, without drama or self-congratulation, as simply as she might point out a loose thread on his jacket. "Thank you," he said. "Of course," she said, and went back to the annex. He pulled the 3 bottles from service, had replacements brought up from the locked reserves, and said nothing of it to anyone at the dinner. He stood at his post throughout the evening in his customary way, and he watched Mr. Vor at the head of the table, the feared man composed as always, watchful, conducting the dinner with a few words and long silences, and he thought about the quiet woman in the annex, who had crouched on the cold stone floor over a wine bottle's capsule crimp, and carried what she found to him, rather than keeping her head down. He did not connect it yet to the larger thing. That came 4 days later. He was crossing the upper hall on a Thursday morning when he heard voices from the direction of Mr. Vor's study. Not raised, not agitated, but something in their register made him slow without meaning to. Nora's voice, clear and steady. Then Mr. Vor's lower, a question. Then a silence that had weight to it. Delmore had learned in 24 years not to linger near the study door. He continued across the hall. What he learned afterward came in pieces, from the household secretary, from the estate's own solicitors, who arrived from the city the following morning and occupied the dining room for most of the day with their documents, and finally, from Mr. Vor himself, who called the senior household staff together at 4 o'clock and told them in 11 words that Crane had been dismissed and that the solicitors would explain the rest. This is what Nora had carried to the study on Thursday morning. While working through the water damage section of the lower archive, she had found a ledger from the estate's founding year, one of the warped volumes she had been repairing page by page, pressing and drying each leaf under archival board. Between the 9th and 10th page, she had found a margin note in a different hand from the ledger's main entries. 3 lines, written in pencil, initialed at the close. It described a specific allocation of the family trust's residual interest, a percentage assigned to a charitable endowment that the founder had established for the care of the estate's retired workers. The note contradicted the formal inheritance record on file with the solicitors, which showed that percentage absorbed into the general estate. 11 years' worth of interest on that percentage, quietly redirected. And tucked between the ledger's backboard and its lining cloth, 3 letters, folded small, each one addressed in the same hand, each one dated across a span of 8 months in the founder's last year. Letters the founder had written to the solicitors instructing them to honor the margin note allocation. Letters that had never reached the solicitor's office, because Crane had intercepted them before they were posted and filed them in a volume he had designated as flood-damaged and therefore unprocessed. She had found the note and the letters on a Wednesday. She had spent that evening cross-referencing them against the formal record she located in the upper archive, the section Crane had told her not to touch, and to which she had, after finding the margin note, asked the household secretary for access. She had made a careful copy of each document in her own hand, and on Thursday morning she had come to the study, laid the originals and her copies on Mr. Vor's reading table, and explained quietly what she had found. She had not speculated. She had not accused. She had not prefaced what she found with apology, or with any qualification about her role as a day hire who had no standing to bring such a thing forward. She had presented the documents and told him what they showed, in the same manner she had carried the wine bottle to Delmore in the passage, as a plain fact that he would want to know, and that would be worse for everyone if it went unspoken. The solicitors were called by noon. Crane was gone by 2 o'clock the following morning, dismissed through the formal channel, with the solicitor's letter in his coat and a financial recovery order filed before the day was out. There was no scene, no confrontation in the hall, no raised voice. There was only the stillness of a house from which something dishonest had been quietly removed. Delmore carried the evening service that night, almost without thinking. He was still turning over the shape of it, the quiet woman, the wine capsule, the ledger, the 3 letters folded small, when he passed the open door of the archive annex late in the afternoon and stopped. Mr. Vor was inside. It was the first time, in Delmore's memory, that he had entered that room since his father's death. He stood at the far shelving unit with the water-damaged ledger open in his hands, reading the margin note. The afternoon light through the north window was pale and flat, and the room smelled of archival tissue and old paper, and Nora was standing near the window with her hands quiet at her sides, not speaking, giving him the silence. Mr. Vor read the note once, then again, then closed the ledger carefully. He stood with it in his hands for a moment. When he looked up, he did not look toward the door. He looked at Nora. He said her name. Not the day hire, not the archivist. Her name, Nora, the way you say the name of a person you intend to remember. He told her the position was hers, if she would have it. Not a contract, not a term engagement. The position. The archive's permanent keeper. He told her there was a great deal of work still to be done. She said, without hesitation, that she would like that very much. Delmore moved away from the door without sound. He did not know precisely what he felt, standing in the corridor of the house he had served for 24 years. Something was shifting in the way a room shifts when it has been cold for a long time and a lamp is brought in. Not dramatic, not sudden, but undeniable once you noticed it. There was one more thing he witnessed, 3 weeks later, that he has carried with him since. Nora had stayed. She had taken the archivist's rooms in the East Wing, recatalogued the damaged volumes, and begun the quiet, careful work of restoring the suppressed correspondence to the estate's formal record. She was not loud about it. She was not triumphant. She came to meals in the household dining room, she learned the staff's names, and she treated the work as work, serious, patient, worthy of her full attention. On an evening in late November, when the lake outside lay still and the house was quiet, Delmore saw Mr. Vore come to the door of the archive annex and say something to Nora that Delmore could not hear. He watched her set down her work and follow him down the corridor, toward the east side of the house where Mr. Vore kept his private reading room, a room Delmore had served for 24 years and entered perhaps 3 times, and only ever alone. He did not follow them. But when he came past the east corridor an hour later, the reading room door was ajar, and the lamplight inside was warm, and he could hear Mr. Vore's voice, low, steady, unhurried, reading aloud. It was, Delmore recognized after a moment, his father's journal. The volume the solicitors had recovered from among Crane's personal effects, a private record, written in the founder's own hand across the last 2 years of his life, catalogued by Crane as missing and never surfaced in 11 years of his tenure. It was in Nora's care now, along with the rest of the recovered material, and apparently, it was no longer missing. He did not catch the words. He heard only the quality of the voice, the feared man's voice, without its customary armor, reading from a page in the lamplight to someone who was present and still and listening, the way a person listens when they understand that what is being given to them is not a formality but a trust. Delmore continued down the corridor. He had carried this house for 24 years, pouring wine for men he feared, and working for a man whose reserve was so complete it had seemed to him, on some evenings, almost architectural. He had watched the seasons come and go at Vore's Reach, and the staff come and go, and the trust's board members come and go, and he had believed he knew everything worth knowing about this house and its feared master. He had not known that it was possible for that voice to sound that way, open and careful and grateful. The thing that 24 years of service had not taught him, a quiet woman in a serviceable coat had shown him in 3 weeks, that the person standing in the corner, saying nothing of herself, and carrying what she found to the right hands, that person was not the least significant one in the room. She was the truest heart in it.